Yisrael, Acheinu, Kol Beis Yisrael.
Shalom Aleichem. It's great to see everyone taking part in the Vayichan program. I wanted to deal with a question which I believe is very simple and straightforward at first glance, but as you see, and we get the answers 2 and 3 actually, is going to open up a door towards a whole new perspective on Hashkafa and Hashkafa Torah, and I think they'll hopefully be very, very insightful and something to benefit from. I want to ask the question of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends us into Galus. Why does Hashem put Galus on Klal Yisrael? He certainly values Eretz Yisrael. He wants us to be in Eretz Yisrael. He wants to be a Beis HaMikdash and all of us back in Eretz Yisrael. So why send us into Galus? So the truth is the most simple, straightforward answer. We say it in davening, Mipnei Chata'enu Galinu Mi'artzenu. We sinned, and it's not just tefillah of Musaf, which is source number 1. It's spelt out pretty clearly in the Psukim, the Tochacha, both in Vayikra and in Dvarim. Both times the Psukim tell us if you behave well, great, but if you misbehave and you do Averos and you sin, God's going to exile you and send you into Chutzlaretz and send you into Galus. So it's not so surprising, it's kind of intuitive. This answer is echoed by numerous Gemaras. I stuck on the Makoros, source number 2, the Gemara on Shabbos, which lists some of the Averos that may have caused it. Many of Gemaras mention many Averos. If you look in the Psukim, Rashi and Eicha spells this out as well. It's Lakis al kol chatosech. It's because you were sin. That's why you were afflicted. That's why you're sent into Galus. The pasuk itself is Gila al kol chatosayich. And the Nachlas David may spell it out. The clears V'od says the Nachlas David, Hachatu ba'atzma b'chatam gedolim shenischayvu Galus ba'avonos atzmam. They were sent into Galus because of their averos. In one word, it was a punishment. However, there are 2 other perspectives out there which I find unbelievably enlightening and unbelievably inspiring and unbelievably interesting and intriguing. The second one I'm going to attribute to Rav Hirsch, even though the truth is he's not the first one to say it, and I think he just says it the clearest and develops it the most beautifully. In the 19 letters, it's letter number 9. Let me read you it. I'll try my best to develop it, and I'll try to go back and look at some of the Marmakomos that I guess say it as well. Rav Hirsch in the 19 letters, again, letter number 9, I'm reading from the inside, says, rather, the ruin of the state, referring to Galus, was itself part and parcel of Yisrael's destiny, which was to bring about the revelation of God and of man's calling. In other words, it sounds part of Klal Yisrael's destiny. It almost sounds like Galus was ideal or lechatchila, something we're building towards, something we want, something we benefit from. Now, the truth is, Rav Hirsch was critiqued heavily for seemingly valuing Galus. Does he not believe in Gula, Mashiach, Yimas HaMashiach, and Beis HaMikdash? This is not what he wants. So I think in order to understand Rav Hirsch properly, let's kind of zoom out. Let me share with you a unbelievably large theory, hypothesis about Torah in general, and hopefully that will give a perfect setup for Rav Hirsch. If I had to ask you what is the goal of Chumash, or if you had to summarize Chumash in a paragraph or in a sentence or in a few, what is the goal of Chumash? What's the goal of Tanakh? So let me start off by suggesting the following. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants man to recognize who he is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants man to recognize he's the Ribono Shel Olam. There are many, many Marmakomos that say this. Take a look in the last Ramban in Parshas Bo, but many, many Marmakomos. That's just maybe one of the best. God wanted Adam to recognize who he was. And therefore he said, Adam, don't eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. And Adam disobeyed. And that kind of undermines who God is. If you don't listen to God, if you don't feel the obligation to listen to God, if you're not listening to Ribono Shel Olam, do you see him as the Ribono Shel Olam? In a certain sense, the first 11 prakim of Sefer Bereshis are all mistakes, avera after avera, mistake after mistake. I think the Ramban spells this out clearly in Bereshis Aleph Aleph. First, Adam and Chava, then Cain kills his brother. Then Noach and his entire generation create a society based on theft and sexual promiscuity and averos. And God presses reset on the world, starts fresh. And then the Dor Haflaga. I'm going to detour for 1 second, show you something unbelievable. It'll take 2 minutes, it's mamish, it's worth it. Dor Noach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way he punishes him, destroys him, is kind of like he press resets on creation. He kind of starts it again. And if you think of that, it's mamish remarkable how he does it. There's water above and water below. That is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings the Mabul. That's very reminiscent of day number 2 in terms of the 7 days of creation. Then the water recedes and the earth resurfaces, and all of a sudden there's land, and on the land grows flowers and trees and plant and vegetation, etc., which is very, very reminiscent of day number 3. And then Noach sends out birds into the air. So that means there's birds in the air and fish in the water. That's strikingly similar to day number 5. And afterwards, animals, notably Noach, return back to earth, re-inhibit the land, develop the land, move back onto the earth, move onto land. And that sounds very similar to day number 6. And I think the point is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the world and recreated it, it's kind of like pressing reset. He refreshed it. He began the Noach situation the same way he did it originally back in Bereshit, which is a remarkable thing. If you're paying attention carefully, I skipped days 1, 4, and 7. That's because days 1, 4, and 7 didn't need to be refreshed. 1 is light and dark. That's in the cosmos. 4 is sun, moon, and stars. That's in the cosmos. 7 is Shabbos. It was only the earth, the physical land of earth, that had to be refreshed, and that's what Kadosh Baruch Hu did. Back to where we were. I thought that was Givaldic. Back to where we were. So Adam and Chava messed up, Cain and Hevel messed up, Noach and messed up, Dur HaFlag messed up. And each time HaKadosh Baruch Hu tried something a little new. One time he took him out of Gan Eden. One time he gave him the Shabbat Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. One time he pressed refresh and started again. One time he gave them individuality and let them do their own thing. Not everyone speaking the same language. And Devar Mechadim, everyone had their own independence and their own individual identity. Dur HaFlag. And failure after failure after failure until really a beacon of hope, mamish, the pinnacle, a beacon of hope occurred as Avram Avinu began to teach and preach, educate and inspire. Avram Avinu began to start teaching and inspiring the world of the Rabbanu Shalom. And no longer is the Lord of the Flies a total Hefkerwelt where everything is out of control, no one moving in the right direction. Avram began to inspire, to educate, to teach, to preach, to bring and to motivate, to teach the Midos and the Rabbanu Shalom Tzedek u'Mishpat, to teach HaKadosh Baruch Hu's values in this world. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu recognized and appreciated that. And then after Avram, his children, Yitzchak and Yaakov, and that's what Bereshit is until the beginning of Shmos, when we ultimately become a nation. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that this nation has the koach, the potential, B'schosavos and other things, that he wants us to become his nation. He wants us to fill Avraham's shoes, so to speak, try as best as we can to carry on Avram's message, to carry the flame, to teach and to educate, to inspire, to cultivate the Rabbanu Shalom's values in this world. And he signs a covenant with us. He signs a treaty, a bris, at Har Sinai. And at Har Sinai says, I'll be a God to you and you be a nation to me. You be my nation. You impact the world. You serve as a role model nation. You be my chosen nation, chosen to help me teach, educate, and inspire. It's like a teacher. When the teacher walks out of the room, it's a balagan, it's a total hefkerwelt. When the teacher is there, the teacher navigates and inspires and educates and teaches the values. And that's ultimately what Klal Yisrael's job is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu signs that treaty with us at Har Sinai, chooses us to be his primary, central, chosen nation, and then wants to get us into Eretz Yisrael, a land where we can do it. Unfortunately, we don't succeed in that. In Chumash, that doesn't occur till Sefer Yoshua. But in Sefer Yoshua, things are looking very promising. So much that the Gemara Dharma says that if we wouldn't have sinned, referring to Sefer Shoftim, Yisrael, we wouldn't need anything except for Chamisha Chumshei Torah and Sefer Yoshua. We would be educating, inspiring, building a country in Eretz Yisrael, a society, a malchus based upon the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What a beautiful thing. Isn't that exactly what he wants? Unfortunately, Sefer Shoftim we failed, and Sefer Malachim we patch it up. Sefer Shmuel we patch it up again, but Sefer Malachim again kind of spirals out of control. All the kings in the north are terrible and horrific, and they have Zara, and the kings in the south, most of them are not so good. And there's corruption and averos and non-religious behavior, and ultimately God sends us Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, and we sin, and God says, okay, we're going to go into Galus. No longer do we have this responsibility of living in Eretz Yisrael, building the Rabbanu Shalom's ideal society, one that reflects his value system. And the plan originally was we would do mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael, and God would reward us with rain, with economical growth, with agricultural success, with military sovereignty. We say this in Shema, we say this throughout Chumash. If we behave well in Eretz Yisrael, God will reward us and make things great. And ultimately, we did not behave in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore God did not treat us bad. And it wouldn't make sense to, so to speak. The reason why we're behaving well in Eretz Yisrael, and the reason why we're educating and inspiring, is this where the whole world can say, look at HaKadosh Baruch Hu's incredible role model nation. Look how this society functions. Look how these Jews develop their existence in Eretz Yisrael. Unfortunately, we didn't live up to those expectations. And the Rebbe Shalom's like, okay, so to speak. It's not a punishment as much as it is a natural consequence. It doesn't pay to keep you here. You weren't accomplishing the goal that you were set out to do there, and therefore God puts us into Galus. And here's where I think Rav Hirsch continues and says, now it's part of our destiny to develop a nation which can now impact differently, so to speak. And Rav Hirsch writes similarly in the ninth letter of the 19th letter, where he says, but every Jew by his exilent example were a teacher of universal justice and love. If thus the dispersed of Yisrael were quietly to flourish as the priests of God and of true humanity, dear Benjamin, who's writing to in the 19 letters, if only we lived up to what we were supposed to be. Rav Hirsch, I think, believes that instead of having a national mission, which was building Malchus Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, the way led by the Malachim, inspired by the Nevi'im, and keeping halacha, instead our job kind of shifted ever so slightly. The mission statement shifted ever so slightly. Now we have a Galus mission. If you can't serve as a nation in Eretz Yisrael, so go into Galus and serve as individuals. Instead of inspiring the world nationally, serve as individuals, inspire the world as individuals. And Hirsch speaks about this a lot. Germans in Germany and France, French in French, and apparently the American and English and the American in England and in America, and all the Dalit Kanfo in Australia and Russia. The goal is to kind of spread out throughout the Dalit Kanfo Sa'aretz and use the Ribono Shel Olam's Torah, halacha, hashkafa, cultivate people who are impressive people based upon the attributes and midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Learn Torah to develop the religious personality and serve as a role model to the world as individuals opposed to as a nation. That, I think, is how Rav Sham Shemfel should understand Galus. It's almost like a natural consequence. We didn't succeed at level number one, therefore we can succeed at a different model over here in Galus. And you do find hints of this throughout. If you look at the Makor sheet, source number 6, the Gemara Pesach Madaf, Pei Zayin Mabei says, Am Rav Elazar, Lo Higla Kadosh Baruch Hu Es Yisrael Lebein HaUmos, Ela Kadei Sheyitfasu Aleim Gerim, to add, make more Gerim. There are some who take that literally to have people convert. You know, that the Yiddish and the Shamas that were not born as Jews should have the opportunity to convert. But that's not how the Maharsha, the Chidush Agad in source number 7 understands. He says, Ela Kadesh Yitfasu Aleim Gerim, Dahainu Lefarseim Ha'amuna, Gam B'shari of Dekochav, to inspire and educate. This is what the Nitziv writes in Bamidbar as well, in Perek Chav Dalet Pasuk Zayin. The same message, not on this Gemara, but independently. Kadesh es yado shem shamayim v'uikar tachlis shala galus. The goal is to be mekadesh shem shamayim. Yachin Avos writes the same thing as well. Ela al kain the gerim dipsachim hainu shilimdu ma'aseyim v'munasem yu ke'enav gerei toshav. L'chein itztavo gam kein ha'yisrael b'mitzvahs yiseros v'yoser mishomis. We should have more mitzvahs than the other nations to elevate ourselves more, to inspire the nations, not so much to convert them, but to educate them with the hashkafas haTorah for the world, not to act like Jews, but to understand the values and midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is really answer number 2. I'm not going to read it in 7. If you look in source number 10, Rebbeinu Bachya mentions both answers. A, it's an onesh, like Mahalach number 1. B, like Rav Sham Shmuel Hirsch, Mahalach number 2. The goal is to inspire the world as individuals as opposed to a nation. And those are 2 wonderful Mahalachim. I want to share with you Mahalach number 3. Mahalach number 3, and I haven't seen this inside Rav Kook himself, but it's probably something he said. His Talmidim definitely echo this message loudly. But before I get to this, I want to share with you 2 interesting shitas of Rishon, which you already see traces in it. If you look in Rashi, in the Chumash, in Devarim, the Rashi, and the Ramban, in Vayikra, both seem to make the same point. The pasuk says in Kriyat Shema, Usamtem as Devrei Ela al Vavchem. In the second paragraph of Shema, first God says, if you behave well, you'll get rain and things will be good. And if you do mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael, I'll reward you, as we mentioned earlier on. And if you don't, then you'll send it to Galus. Put tefillin on, Usamtem, as Devrei Ela al Vavchem, Kshartem Osaitchem, Vayuzot Avos, etc., etc. So says Rashi. Af la'acharei shita galo, even after you go into Galus, havi mitsuyanim b'mitzvahs. You should still continue doing mitzvahs. Hanichun tefillin, asim mezuzos. Why? Why should we do mitzvahs in Galus? Rashi says something shocking. This way it shouldn't be new and fresh and unfamiliar when you come back to Eretz Yisrael. It almost sounds like the Ramban, Rashi believes, and the Ramban echoes this in source number 12 in Vayichan, the exact same thing. Eino mechayev begalus ela b'toras b'chovas haguf kitzfilin mezuzah supershu b'hem kedei shelo yu chadashim elenu kishenichsel eretz ki ikar heim hamitzvahs liyoshvim be'eretz Yisrael be'eretz Hashem. The goal of mitzvahs seemingly is only in Eretz Yisrael. Here's that Tziyanish Shavort for you. That we only are supposed to keep mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael. Why do we keep them in Galus? Because otherwise we'll forget. Number one, kasha number one on this Ramban and Rashi. Really? Is there no value in chutzlar? And even if you'll tell me, okay, it's just a philosophy, it's a time of the mikra, it's not mamash kiyum mitzvah. Still, like really, why is there more value for mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael than in chutzlar? So much so that I've never saw shlita paskin to a person wears tefillin in chutzlar and a plane lands in Eretz Yisrael. The plane should be flying soon. Lands in Eretz Yisrael, l'chadchila, it's a chumrah, not mikra din. Better to put on tefillin again, because tefillin in Eretz Yisrael is in a dome at tefillin in chutzlar. It's every mitzvah. Why are mitzvahs better, number one? And number two, if really the reason's just to remember them, did we do that? Didn't we forget how to put on tefillin, how to do tzitzis, everything? There's a machlokes, but every single detail in the Torah. Every single mitzvah we did in Galus. In chutzlar, it's every mitzvah we did. When we are returning, will return. When you come back, every single din is subject to machlokas. What did we remember? If we would have forgotten it, and everyone would have taken the best guess and learned the Torah's best possible and come up with the best shita they can come up with, what would be different? It'd be 100,000 shitas also. Now there's 100,000 shitas. The machlokas about everything. So my questions are twofold on this Rashi and Ramban. Number one, is there really deeper value in Eretz Yisrael than chutzlar? Why should mitzvahs have greater value in Eretz Yisrael than chutzlar? Number two, if the whole reason is to remember them, did we even accomplish that? Are we accomplishing that? Does anyone think we will? Isn't machlokes like out of control? So I want to share with you what I think the answer is to this question, as well as Mahalach number 3. Mahalach number 3 starts off the same way as Mahalach number 2 does, with the same backdrop that we gave to our first. God created the world, and He wanted mankind to recognize Him, and Adam and Cain and Noach and Dor Haflaga, and unfortunately they failed, and then God chose a nation based upon Avraham rising to the occasion and educating and inspiring God's Bris Har Sinai and Eretz Yisrael, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu Dafka put us in Eretz Yisrael to lead and to inspire. And by the way, I'll add in, it's probably geographically centered amongst the 3 most prominent continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, for most of world history. And once North and South America became part of the geopolitical world, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu created something called media, and ultimately social media, which put Eretz Yisrael right forefront and center, right in the middle, in the merkaz of the world. The world should know what's going on in Eretz Yisrael, and the reason why is because we should serve as a role model nation. And similar to what we said earlier on, we messed up in Sefer Shoftim and Sefer Shmuel. We elevated ourselves a little bit, and the kings messed up, and Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu gave us Musar, and we did not take it properly, and we failed, and we went into Galus. But instead of shifting our goal towards now focusing predominantly on being individuals in Galus, argues Mahalach number 3. We have a responsibility to use Galus to develop a more proper, a better chance to return back to Eretz Yisrael and live up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expectations. In other words, in Eretz Yisrael during Shlomo HaMelech, he was in the times of the Malachim, even certainly after Shlomo, the kings were worried about political issues and economic issues and military issues and foreign policy and domestic policy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, so to speak, go into Galus, where you don't have to worry about anything but Torah mitzvahs. Become frum, become stark, become committed in Galus. And when you're ready, you'll come back to Eretz Yisrael later on, once you're frum and once you're stark, and once halach is built into the genes of your hashkafa, once it's pashut that keeping Torah mitzvahs is essential and critical and necessary, once it's a no-brainer, then you can start coming back to Eretz Yisrael and inspiring and building and trying your best to come back and accomplish this broader goal of educating and inspiring the world with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's values. If you don't have the foundation, which is Torah mitzvahs, so there's no value of coming back and just geographically being here. And I think that's what Rashi and the Ramban have in mind. I think what Rashi and the Ramban have in mind is you go into Galus and you keep mitzvahs there, not so you should remember how to keep them. The whole idea is that you should build into your national ideology keeping them. Rashi's lesson, it's not that you'll forget how to keep the details. There'll be a machlokas. I'm not worried about the detail, how to put on tefillin, Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, how to tie tzitzis like Ashkenazim or Sephardim, details in one bracha on tefillin or two brachas. That's not the issue. What Rashi and the Ramban mean over here is it should be built into your religious DNA. It should become part of who you are. Your identity should be rooted in halacha. It shouldn't be chadash. It should become part of who you are. When you come back to Eretz Yisrael, frumkeit is a no-brainer. It's pashut into who you are. And this way, when we come back, hopefully, halacha will be built into who we are. And I think that is maybe why mitzvahs have more value in Eretz Yisrael as well. Because one of the, if not the, ideas behind mitzvahs is representing the Rabbonu Shalom in the land where that he chose. This way we can create a religious community, society, identity, a national identity which reflects the Rabbonu Shalom. As the world will say, wow, why are they so successful? Why are they militarily succeeding? And why is economics going the right way? And why is agriculture going the right way? And foreign policy and domestic policy? And why is the poverty rate so low? And why is crime so low? And why is there no starving people? Why are they succeeding? One Jewish country operates by the Torah, and all of a sudden they're the most successful one in the world. And the answer is, it's just indicative of the fact that the Rabbonu Shalom exists and wants us to serve him this way. That is, I think, the third model. Similar to the second insofar as you go into Galus as a result opposed to a punishment, but different insofar as that the goal doesn't shift towards educating and inspiring the world as individuals, but rather continuing to revert back to where we were in order to educate and inspire the world nationally. Those, I think, are the three shittas. If I could add in just one word of divrei hashkafa, which I think is really the Achdut part of this year and a great way to walk into Tisha B'Av. Many would argue that we're living through powerful, religious, inspiring days. The more Tzion will say to the Medina, the less Tzion will say the kibbutz Galus is going on despite the Medina. Leaving aside hashkafa right now, it's difficult to look around at the world and not see Klal Yisrael returning back home, numbers-wise, in terms of geography, in terms of the demographics. Klal Yisrael is moving forward in so many wonderful areas. So many wonderful areas. Limud Torah. In the 1930s, Torah was in Europe. In the 1980s, was in America. These days, Torah made aliyats in Eretz Yisrael. The progress we've made in many areas. And I think the one piece which really will bring us to the next level is instead of looking over our shoulders and figuring out why our hashkaf is right and other people's hashkaf is wrong, why we are right and they're not, why we're correct and they are incorrect, is instead if we learn how to love what we love more than we hate what we hate. Love Achdut, love identifying with Torah, loving Klal Yisrael more than things that we dislike or disagree with about others. It's important to learn how to respect others' lishma points when we disagree. And I think the goal for us right now, certainly during these 9 days, is to want to learn from each other, appreciate what the others bring to the table, appreciate what they offer, whether they offer anything that they offer, to learn how to be inspired by what they offer, to learn how to appreciate what they offer, to build together. Those who bring frumkeit of Galus, we should appreciate what they do. Those who bring forward thinking of Geula, we should appreciate what they do. Those who financially support it, those who set a religious standard, those who protect us from enemies, those who protect us, whether it's through the army or through Talmud Torah, it's important that we should start looking to each other and what we do well and appreciating what we do well, opposed to figuring out reasons why what we do is right and what they do is wrong. At the end of the day, we should value bringing the Geula more than we value being right. And Mir Hashem, with this attitude, hopefully we'll inspire ourselves. It's like fever, it catches quickly, and inspire others. And hopefully we'll take prominent steps forward to bringing the Geula Shlema from here.